Hello, everyone. As you may have heard, we have a new community program coordinator, which we are so excited to have join the team. So I'm joined here with Moses, and we want to just have a little, record a little video just to talk a little bit together, get to know, and give you a chance to get to know Moses a little bit more. So, Moses, would you like to introduce yourself, your name, pronouns, and any where you're from, and anything else that you want to share with the community?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Moses. I use the pronouns he, him, or they, them. So I'm originally from southeastern Wisconsin. So I will still claim that. But currently, I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I've lived in Atlanta for about 4 years. I'm an organizer. I organize with the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, the Freedom Church of the Poor, and the National Union of the Homeless. And I'm also a cultural worker. So I'm a playwright and a theater like teacher and stuff. And then also outside of that, I'm on the pastoral staff at Church of the Common Ground, which is a street ministry in Atlanta that is mostly a ministry with the in-house. And I'm really, really excited to be joining the team here at TMC.
You it's always like when you share like what you do and all the different things that you do, I'm like always amazed at how many different things and like different roles that you hold together. It's really exciting to have you as part of the team. Um,
Yeah, no, I'm really grateful to be a part of the team. Yeah, thank you.
well, I was wondering if you would share a little bit about your kind of your spiritual background, your spiritual journey, and what has your faith journey been like, and where are you at now? And of course, feel free to share as much or as little as you feel like you would like to.
Yeah. So I usually say I'm Catholic, but it's a little bit loose, but it probably is the most like the thing that I'm most comfortable with. And I also often kind of joke that I'm like a third generation almost pastor and a second semester seminary dropout, which is both true. Yeah, I wasn't raised in the most like religiously observant household, although we were Catholic. But I myself had a really strong connection to God from when I was young. Yeah, that just manifested in me being close to God, reading the Bible, talking to God and praying a lot. But I wasn't connected to a church or a church community or anything. And when I went to college, I went to school for playwriting and TV writing and screenwriting and stuff. And I found that oftentimes, like the only thing that I would write about would be God and would be like
Mm.
questions about God and things that I was trying to process about God. But I never really foresaw like a future in ministry or anything like that. And a part of that was just like, I didn't know any ministers, like no one, I feel like everyone I went to school with was like atheists or just like not connected. And so that wasn't a huge part of my life. But when I was a junior in college, I got involved. I was a student fellow with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. And it was March. It was the first week of March of 2020 that a bunch of us, it was like students from across the country, went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. for grassroots organizing training. And there, I got to learn a lot about like the later life and organizing of Reverend Dr. King. And then I also got to meet a bunch of like ministers who were basically like doing work and stuff that I never even thought a minister could do. And I never had
Mm.
met like faith leaders like them. And so that's where I met Reverend William Barber and Reverend Liz Theo Harris, who Reverend Liz especially has been a really important part of my life and my journey. And we had a night where we watched like a documentary about the Poor People's Campaign called We Cried Power. And there was a moment afterwards where Reverend Eric Williams, who is a pastor with Disciples of Christ, she gave like this whole basically speech where she was like talking about how we all belonged there and we all like belonged in the movement. It didn't matter who we
Mm.
were, didn't matter where we came from or how we identified. It didn't matter if we were like straight, gay, trans, or like anything. This is like where we were meant to be, and we were supposed to be in that room. And it was like such a spiritual experience for me to hear that from a pastor, because up until that point, I just had assumed that no pastors like that existed.
Mm.
And so I went up to her and I hugged her. And I remember going to my hotel room that night. And I remember just like basically just like coming to terms with like being trans and like being a trans person. And I went back and I shared that, with the group. And then it was just like such a moving experience. And then I went back to my dorm room, and then basically like I stepped through my dorm room, and then I got the email that we were all going home because of COVID.
Mm.
And so I went back home. But I feel like kind of from that experience, I just like never really looked back. It really changed the direction of my life. It changed the shape of my life. And I got to learn about a lot of like theology from, I always say that, I feel like I always introduce myself almost always as someone, as a part of the National Union of the Homeless, because the theology and the faith leadership of the homeless organizing in the 80s and 90s really, really shaped me and really inspired me. And introduced me to a lot of really powerful people. And so I found myself going to seminary, which is not something that I ever expected or like anyone in my life ever expected. And I got there and I ended up leaving. It just like wasn't a great fit, but I did end up through seminary getting connected with Church of the Common Ground, which is the church that I'm at right now, which is Ministry with the Unhoused. And I always think like there's this like a timeline or an episode in Seinfeld where like George Costanza doesn't know if he's like gonna get fired from his job or like he doesn't
Mhm.
get fired, but Jerry's like just keep showing up and eventually they'll like hire you back. And I always joke that's kind of how it went with Common Ground, is like I just really liked it and I never left. And then gradually I was just there so much that they were like, do you just want to be on staff? Like, will you help us like coordinate this? But that's been a really moving experience too, though, because I've been really pushed and stretched in ways that I just hadn't had, before. I was pushed to lead Bible study. I was pushed to, offer pastoral care. And I really, was also fortified by people who had, such a strong biblical and theological conviction
Mm.
and foundation. And so a lot of like I just continue to learn so much from folks, and I continue to be like challenged and shaped. And it also to me just shows, some of my most like core beliefs, that I do believe that, God resides, maybe the most with folks who are on the outskirts of society, and folks who, tend to find themselves in positions where they've been otherwise shut out of society for whatever reason. They can tend to have the strongest connection to God, because that
Mhm.
may be who God is speaking to and trying to reach the most. Oh, sorry, my computer. Trying to reach the most. And so all of these things have kind of just really shaped me. And in a sense, it makes sense that I ended up where I am today. And I
Mhm.
can see it very clearly and it makes a lot of sense. But I always think sometimes people around me are a little bit surprised when they see the direction that my life has taken. But I also think that is true probably of a lot of folks who find themselves, called to ministry or, to
Mhm.
something spiritual.
Yeah. It sounds like, and I think it makes sense too from what you're as you were talking about your journey. It sounds like um, activism, advocacy, justice, faith, and your trans journey and your kind of your journey with gender as well are like very woven together.
Yeah.
Um, and so it makes a lot of sense that like you would find yourself in those following that call and following that sense of where you're called to be. Thank you so much for sharing that. And like as I was saying, it sounds like there's some kind of connection between and like there's a deep connection between your faith and your gender journey. Would you share a little bit about your gender journey and how you identify, as well as how has faith been part of that, and how is maybe also your gender exploration or journey been part of your faith? You've already kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little more.
Yeah, no, I think definitely, like you said, I mean, it has more recently been very intertwined, and I think a lot of it has really kind of moved and like breathed with each other. But I would say my like gender journey was in some ways kind of difficult, in the sense that I knew I was like I knew something was up for most of my life, but I think I
Relatable.
was, yeah, right. But I feel like I'm more gravitated towards like, lesbian, gay, and that is often what kind of felt right for me. It's not that it felt right, it's just kind of what felt like was available. And so that is,
Mhm.
how I kind of identified and how yeah, what I would tell folks and stuff. But I think, there was just like senses, of really wanting to really feeling like it was something, that had to do with gender and had to do with how I was expressing myself in that way, and, all the things, I would shave my head and I would, wanna wear men's clothes and do all this stuff. I always really wanted to do, like, drag and be a drag king and have, basically opportunities where I could dress up, like a boy and like a man, and, I think that it was really hard for me though to kinda come to terms with that because there are aspects of being trans that are just inherently very public,
Mhm.
especially if you choose to transition. It's just a very public process, and I think
Yeah.
that was really difficult for me because I'm a pretty private person, and so having to do something, very public and very vulnerable felt impossible for me. I didn't imagine that I would ever be able to be in a place to do that. Um, but I think that, part of what kind of helped me through that was, I think, supportive people in my life and people who saw me for who I was and who didn't question it, and also people who maybe saw it before I did and, like, knew about it, but let me take my time to get there, and then, were supportive when I got there. And also people that were really encouraging about how, like, there's no right way to be trans.
Mhm.
There's no, like, right way or, specific way that you have to do it, or there's no timeline that fits for everyone. Some people know, and once they know, they want to, transition as soon as possible, or, take a path for whatever as soon as possible. And for other folks, it takes slower and more time. And I found myself to be someone that it took me more time to really feel
Mm.
and think through that. And so I would say that, like, for me, I identify as trans masc, and I identify as like a gay trans masc person, basically. And I think that, like, yeah, I'm grateful to have recently like started HRT and had that be like a part of my journey. But it's been a long process to get there. But I am grateful for the support that I've had and being able to get there. Um, and, yeah, and I think in terms of, like, my gender and faith, I think that I have always had, a lot of times when I felt very close to God, even when I was young, is when I was, like, entertaining questions of kind of thinking to myself, even as a high schooler, of, like, What if God is gay?" What if
Huh.
Jesus is gay? What if, like, actually, like, Jesus is, was, in love with Judas? I mean, I was I was a closeted kid, so it expressed in weird ways, but I can look back and see, though, that, in a sense, I was just trying to see myself in God and in the Bible, and did it in the way that I knew how. But and I think that these expressions of God in these spaces, has been really important in my journey of understanding both like gender, but then also faith. And so, I would say that, like, part two of what has been like affirming is, ideas too of like, finding a lot of connection in God and in Jesus, in music, and in particular in disco music. And so Sylvester
Mm.
has been, really, really, influential for me. And Sylvester was, a disco singer from like the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And he was a gay man, and he was like fabulous and beautiful and wonderful. And he was also very religious. And so
Mm,
reading a lot of his like biographies about his connection to God and how he viewed his concerts as church, and basically viewed like his concerts as people coming and going to church, was so huge in me being able to reconcile like my faith and my identity. I think the last thing too is just like, as I said before, is just support. And so, having especially supportive faith leaders, and especially supportive trans faith leaders. And so
mm.
I would credit Aaron Scott, who is now the gender officer at the Episcopal Church, as like, he's my dad. He calls me his son. He's my dad. His biological son is also named Moses. And so like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, he's always like my two sons, Moses and Moses. But his like support and love from the beginning has been really, really beautiful. And also the way that he has also provided me with some more like theological and biblical
Mm,
understandings of like God and gender and faith has been, really beautiful. And he's also a big reason why I took this job, and was someone who was very encouraging and taking a step, towards this and doing this. And so there's a lot of people that I can like, really credit to being a part of that. But I think Aaron has been like a really big part in me being able to not just reconcile these two things, but seeing that like these two things are so intertwined
mhm.
and live and breathe into each other,
That's amazing. I love that one that you have it sounds like have a lot of supportive people that kind of were a big part of that process for you. And
Mhm,
also what you just said about the reconciling. It's not just about reconciling, like, can you be trans? Can you be Christian at the same time? Because we know, yes, there are plenty of us, but also that there is like an amazing ways that those two things go together in and are actually bring so much to one another.
mhm,
And I love the kind of finding church, like um, finding church, finding God in ways that are outside of like a traditional church space.
yeah,
And I love the ways that that has been big part. It sounds like for
yeah,
you in coming to know yourself, and also in coming to embody your calling. So
thank you.
well, one more kind of question as we kind of close here is what excites what first of all, what drew you to TMC? You kind of already mentioned a little bit there, but like what drew you to TMC and what excites you about TMC, the work we do, and your new role?
Mm. Yeah, so before I came to TMC, I worked at an organization called the Salmon Devora Foundation for Transgender Youth, and so I was the program and development coordinator there for about just over 2 years, almost 3 years, and there I worked primarily with trans and non-binary youth across the country. I loved working with the youth, and I loved like getting to know them more. I loved getting to help like build out some of the programming that we did. But I also found when I was there that like what was hard is that like most of the kind of like abuse and like shame that they would get would either be
Mhm.
from in the home or from behind the pulpit, and more recently from the state as well. But I would say that like stuff like religious trauma was something that we saw quite often.
Yeah.
And so it was also for that space. It was also for that reason that foundation was very specifically. And is still, although there's parts that are growing secular, and we made it a big point for it to be a secular space, and a space where that was not a part of it. And so that is important, but in some ways it was what the challenge it kind of presented for me is that it felt like there was kind of two major parts of my identities that were kind of separate in that way, and that I couldn't totally show up as someone who was a ministry leader and someone who was strongly connected to God in that way, in that organization, just because of how it was. And so when I saw an opening at TMC, I literally, I saw it, and I think I saw the post like maybe like a minute after it was posted, and I applied like right away. I
Yeah,
just
you
like
did. Your application came in pretty early. I didn't realize it was that early.
yeah.
Wow.
I like didn't even think about it. I just like applied right away. And I had been connected to TMC before. So when I first moved to Atlanta, I had gone to some support groups. I've been like kind of on the periphery of the community for like a few years now. And so I had known about the work that like y'all had done, and I had been excited about it. And I had felt too that it was just like almost a perfect like kind of combination of these two things that were such a big part of me. And it just felt like a step in a position that basically have been working towards for like the past couple of years. And so it was just like, I'm really excited in that way, just like in a personal and like a spiritual level. It's very meaningful for me to like get to be here and to get to grow in this way. But I think like outside of that, in terms of like what I'm excited for, is that I've loved starting to get to know the community and getting to know folks. I've loved being on support groups and like, yeah, just getting to like share with each other and be vulnerable with each other and start to build that community. And I also am like excited about kind of what like will come. And so I think a lot of like what we'll be thinking about is how to kind of build out and expand our volunteer program, and just like find ways for folks to be able to go deeper and further, and feel more supported, and just have it be like a better experience for folks. But then also think about things like, leadership development pathways, and, how to help folks, grow and expand in their own faith leadership and spiritual leadership, or, whatever leadership feels right for them. And then also just, yeah, just like how we can build that out and kind of expand the community in that way too. Because I have found, and, I think it's true that like having a supportive system and having people in your life who are supportive and who see you for who you are, is maybe like one of the most, if not the most like critical thing that you can have, in your journey, is having people who love you and see you and support you. And so as much as like we can kind of continue to expand on what is already like such a supportive and great community, it can only just, it can only get stronger and only get better, and I'm also really excited. I have a lot to learn too. And so I'm feel like I'm really excited to learn from the rest of the staff and from the volunteers and from folks. And I think as much as, I think it's kind of a mutual thing. As much as, we are growing like TMC, and that I think like all of us who are a part of the staff and volunteers and myself, we all grow from that too. And I'm really grateful for that as well. So I'm really happy to be a part of the team and excited too for what's to come.
Well, we're so excited to have you join the team and all the different things, the different ways that you have been kind of um, already in activism, already advocating for trans folks, and also in faith leadership. And it's really cool to see that, as you mentioned, like this kind of synergy almost of those parts of yourself. And I agree with you. I think there is an absolute need for secular trans advocacy spaces, and also there is this like unique thing that of this need for spaces that bridge people's spirituality and their gender identity together. And I think that's one of the unique things that we do at TMC. That and one of the things I love about it, and I'm glad that you've already kind of been experiencing that, and also have been experiencing that in the times that you've been getting to know the community, and also for your own kind of past experience with TMC.
Yeah.
Um, Anything else that you wanted to add or share with the community?
I don't think so. I think I'm just grateful to be here, and I'm also like, always reach out to me on email or Discord if you want to like talk or just like get to know me more. And I'm looking forward to just being more of a part of a community. But yeah, just grateful to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Moses. And to everyone, like if you're watching this video, you'll be seeing Moses around more and more in support groups and also on the Discord. And also as we're recording this tomorrow, we're going to have a hangout and a meet and greet. And so you'll be definitely seeing Moses around a little bit more and more. And very excited for you, Moses, to get to kind of interface with the community and also just to bring your kind of experience, your expertise, and also your passion for trans folks and for the community. And so we couldn't be more excited. Well, thank you all, and we will see you. We'll see you around the community.
Awesome. Thank you.